I should have said that they did not need it.
Would have been disrespectful to that person.
Trust me.
Terry? Clerk Royal, you good? I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Before I take attendance, it is my duty to acknowledge the passing, the untimely passing of one of our city's and community's most valued residents. Earlier today, James Jim Robison, the longtime proprietor and owner of Robison Baumler Funeral Home, passed away. He was a leader in the business community and gave generously to a number of philanthropic causes in our area. And so the city of Saline extends its deepest sympathies to his wife, children, and grandchildren. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Members present from City Council this evening are Council members Kamara Sulak, Seo, Delorco, Gearbaugh, Rice, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and myself, Mayor Morrow. From City staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Police Chief Radzik, City Treasurer Cole. Am I missing anybody? We have Deputy Chief Hartwig is in the back, along with a number of other city employees. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended, noting one change, and it's highlighted, and that is the wording of the motion under new business item 23-201, Hero Walk Community Event.
Move to approve.
Moved by Gearbaugh to approve the agenda as amended. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening. I would note for those of you in the audience, we encourage you to sign in the back table. There are also copies of our council agenda along with hearing devices. We come now to the first public comment period, of which there will be two. Under the Open Meetings Act, any person may come forward at this time to make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. If you have a citizen comment on any of our agenda items, we welcome those at this time. I will also note, as it pertains to the presentation on Metro Dispatch Services, if you do have questions, this would be a great time to articulate them, and staff will do their very best to address them when we transition to the presentation in just a few moments. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? Please.
John Heller, 561 Lancaster Court, and I'd like to comment on closing the Saline Police Dispatch. I think there's a lot of reasons, excuse me, why that's a bad idea, but I think the biggest reason is it's union busting beyond a doubt. You are cutting 4 union positions and replacing it with 1 non-union position, and if that's not union busting, I don't know what is. And I realize that Metro Dispatch employees are unionized, but if past practice is any guide, at most 1 or 2 of the people that are cut from here will be hired over there, possibly none. So you end up with a net deficit of union jobs. The other thing is, beyond the union issue, it's totally unfair economically. You've got 3 people at least that are pushing or facilitating cutting the jobs that are making 6 figures, and they're proposing to cut jobs of people that make 5 figures, and as such are some of the lowest paid people in the city. So it's a totally economically unjustified move to cut lower salaried people by the highest salaried people. And my understanding is that the move is being made because there may be some kind of budget deficiency, which I seriously doubt. But even if there is a budget deficiency, my feeling is the cuts should be made at the top, particularly the ones that are making 6 figures and not the people that are making 5. So to sum up, I would say don't be union busters, don't be plutocrats, and don't close Saline Dispatch. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your comments. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items? You'll have 3 minutes.
Matthew Rockwell, 225 Sheffield. I think it's the same thing that John Hiller said, is that we need to keep our Saline Police Department or our dispatch here, because we cannot forward it over to another dispatch like Washtenaw County if there's a house fire, and then have them not have the house burned down to the ground. That's on you guys. That is all on you. So you guys take it under your thoughts and take it under understanding that you guys can still not do anything, and I'm out of here after the first of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. Are there additional citizen comments on agenda items? Please, Officer Connor.
My name is Michael Connor. I'm a retired Saline police officer. If I hesitate, I'm not used to public speaking. Testifying, yes. Speaking, no. I was originally hired on October 5, 1970. In those days, we had 3 dispatchers. People would drive their tractors into town, park in front of the old L&J bar or Berg's, have a few beers, get in a fight with the cops, and go home, or jail, their choice. Now you want to take what we have done from 1966 back to 1966? The call box used to be at the main forward with a traffic light or a red bulb up there. The cop would see it, he'd stop, call it this call box, get the call from Sheriff's Department, and then go on his call. If he didn't go there for a few minutes, call didn't get answered. It is not a smart move. I can count since 1970 a lot of dumb things this city has done. That silly road thing. The bicycle races, just as stupid, lost money on that. Yes. Please keep our dispatchers here. They deserve it. I don't want long distance dialing. I'm sorry. Oh, my address is 422 Hollywood. I apologize, forgot. We don't need long distance dialing for dispatch. Keep them here. These people know what they're doing. They know the citizens that come in here. They know how to interact with them, and they know how to talk with them. They hear the officer speaking. They pick up things up. They know by talking with the officers who is in trouble, who's causing trouble. Is this address bad? Is this address bad? Instead, you've got some people paying $15 an hour sitting in a bunker on hogback that never have human contact with police. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Connor. Any additional citizen comments on any of our agenda items? Please.
Lana Norbury, 212 North Ann Arbor Street. I am very against getting rid of the dispatchers. I think that would cause an undue delay. If someone's breaking in my house and I have to call Washtenaw County to get a policeman to come to my house, I could be dead. I think it's a really bad idea. Ambulance services, police services, we need our dispatchers right here. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Karen Leskovich, 983 Wiltshire Court, a street name that is also up in Ann Arbor. I've seen it as I pass by, and how many other Wiltshire courts are there? I don't know. But I have lived in the city for 48 years. 22 of those I worked here at the City Hall at the water sewer desk, doing water sewer bills, directly opposite dispatch. My contact with them has been that they are just tremendous people. Every one of them that went through from the period that I worked, from the 1990s up to the 2011. I really appreciate what they do. They are quick with their response. They know how to handle it. I have had 2 personal incidents with the 911 system. One of them was a 2-year-old grabbed an old phone that has a star on it that automatically goes to 911. And the officer that picked it up, I walked into the room and I heard, "What is your emergency?" And I go, "Oh, geez." But I explained, it's a 2-year-old, it's a mistake. I said, "I'm here, I'm his grandma, and it was a mistake. Thank you for answering." And they said, "Thank you," and they hung up. The other one was an illness call that ended up being a call to get my mother-in-law over to the hospital. And unfortunately, she didn't survive that illness, but the responders were just so quick. And when I first called in, I must admit I kind of panicked, and I thought, am I doing the right thing? And before I even said a word, I hung up. Immediately, I got a call back, and they were there within minutes. And I just explained, I panicked because I didn't know what to tell them or if I was doing the right thing. But the reason that we moved to this city 48 years ago was because we wanted to raise our kids here if we had kids. So shortly after we got married, within 6 months, we moved to Saline. It had a hospital, which is now gone. It had a fire department, which was a volunteer fire department, and were we glad when they went full-time. It had policemen that we could count on. It had dispatchers who knew the area and who knew how to respond in a quick and very professional manner. And I am rather upset that the way that I heard about this meeting tonight was through a little flyer that was left at a business here in town. It said that the meeting was at 6:30. I said, you know, I've heard about the possibility of going to a central dispatch with Washtenaw County, and I'm not real fond of that idea. We're very opposed to it. Because of the time and the relaying of messages, a lot can be lost. So I'm rather concerned about that. As far as a public meeting, I never heard or saw in the Sun. I'm reading the Sun-Times now because we always signed up for the Reporter. So now I'm contributing to the Sun-Times because they have the legal notices. I never heard of a public meeting, and I may have missed it.
Yep, thank you, Karen. Your 3 minutes have elapsed. Appreciate your remarks. Matthew, we're not going there tonight. Okay? Are there additional citizen comments on agenda items?
Mary Hess. As you know, I attend a lot of council meetings, and serving over 20 years as a city council member. But in March of 14, I think the county came and gave a big presentation on the dispatch as far as going to the county. And then it became quiet. Nobody said anything on council. Nothing was said. It was quiet. We had to be quiet. But the budget went through and the cut was put in. And so that happened. And then we are an aging community. And part of it is security. I am aware that the taxes are high in Saline. But the comfort is knowing dispatchers know where I live. And it's scary sometimes being 84 and living alone. And it's important. Our dispatchers are a very, very important part of our city government. On council, we had health, safety, and welfare. I think health and safety should come before welfare. And I'm sure there's things, window dressings and whatever, that can be cut back. But it's very important for us to keep. It is not popular. I have spoke to many, many, many people, and they all feel the same, that it's a shame and they can't believe that the council is not listening to the people. Thank you.
There are additional citizen comments on agenda items.
Trent Longmore, 325 North Lewis Street. I don't want to get into what my opinion is on here because I have my own self-interest on some of these issues, but I have some questions that I hope tonight's discussions will answer. I don't know how you're going to decide how safe, how to assign value to safety. When you go back to the shooting in August, there were a whole bunch of back and forth between the dispatchers and the police when you listen to the recordings. Something that was the UAW hall, used to be called the Oddfellows Hall or something like that, or
It was always a UAW hall.
what's that?
It was always a UAW hall.
Well, there was some sort of discussion where they talked about something, one location that had a name that predated when I was here. And that's something that the dispatchers and the police seemed to understand immediately, whereas I was scratching my head and Googling stuff, trying to figure out what they were talking about. And so how do you place a value on that? How do you place a value on all the conversations that take place between, specifically between police, Saline Police and Saline dispatchers? And it's not the same on Washtenaw Metro Dispatch. I listen to those too when I have to, and it's not as direct. And then the other question I have is, what about the little things that when citizens call police, like as I've done several times, not for big issues, but hey, there's something strange happening over on the depot trail. Somebody's acting kind of weird. Who do I call for that if it happens at 9 p.m.? And how much is that worth? When I can call 429-7911, I know it's not an emergency, but I still feel it's something that public safety has to address. And then my last question is about the public safety budget, which has gone from $1.7 million in 2017 to over $3 million budgeted this year. And I'd like to know where all that money went if we can't afford to have dispatchers. That's it. I hope some of these questions can be answered. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional citizen comments? You will have 3 minutes. Jen, if I go, please approach the podium, but if you'll indulge me for just a moment, if I could venture such impertinence, just to respond to some earlier comments, because I think there's some confusion. I speak for myself here. I certainly understand and appreciate and respect the passion people have for our local dispatch. They do a phenomenal job, and there's many reasonable arguments that can be made in favor of the service. But I want to be clear, we've discussed this probably at half a dozen public meetings. We had a town hall this past spring, including multiple presentations. I've been talking to numerous residents and constituents about it, so I don't know where the assertion comes that we've been quiet, because I certainly have not.
You have
So,
been quiet.
Mrs. Hess, this is going to be the only warning of the night. You are in the audience, which is derived from the Latin to listen. Okay? You have 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and 3 minutes at the end. There's not going to be any interruptions from you or anybody else during the duration of the meeting. Okay? I apologize, but you need to be polite. Okay? Jen, please.
Jennifer Shana, I'm here as a private citizen. Just want to share a couple of experiences that I've had and what I've seen dispatchers do that may be considered outside of their duty in some aspects. Last fall, I responded to the station because a woman who lived outside the city arrived with her 2-year-old child. She had just been assaulted by her husband. She was afraid he was going to come back, so she came here. The dispatcher contacted the county. County said it's going to be 30 minutes before a trooper can get to you. This was about 8 o'clock at night. The dispatcher had the woman and her small child come in and sit in our conference room. I was then called in. I was given a box from the dispatcher that she keeps up front: crayons, coloring books, water, juice, and crackers, and gave them to the woman. She then told me her story. She had been being beaten for the last 3 years. She had multiple pictures on her phone of black eyes, abrasions to the face, clumps of hair pulled from her head. This was the first time she got the courage to report it. So after 30 minutes, trooper did not show up. We called Metro, said, hey, where's the trooper? He got sent to another call. It's going to be a while. Hour and a half goes by. The woman wanted to leave. The dispatcher talked to her, got her to stay. Trooper showed up, came in to interview the woman. The dispatcher, realizing a 2-year-old child during the interview is not going to be real helpful, had the child and me come up to dispatch, turn on a cartoon. The mother was interviewed for an hour. Trooper left, went out, arrested the husband. Mother was able to return back home. Another incident that I was originally responding off her, 15-year-old female came up to the station. She had a bag from Bush's. She said, I need help calling my dad. My mom just kicked me out of the house. We called her biological father. Then once the dispatcher got more information, realized this girl had been molested by her stepfather. We called CPS. This was all after hours. CPS responded to the station along with the biological father. The mother eventually showed up at the station. She was told either the stepfather could leave the house or the daughter would be turned over to the biological father for her safety. The mother decided to keep the stepfather in the house. It was a couple days later when we got a warrant and we arrested the stepfather on charges. Those are just a couple of incidents with the dispatchers having knowledge of incidents that maybe county wouldn't have because they're not close. They don't work with us like we work with our dispatchers. That has allowed us. I also wonder if we didn't have somebody sitting here after hours, would these people have came up into the station and reported the incidents? Would they have picked up the phone and waited outside for somebody to respond? Just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Shanae. Appreciate those remarks. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items? You will have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Dave Ringe at 551 Marlpool Drive. I'm a retired police officer here at the City of Saline, and I am also going to voice my objection for getting rid of full-time dispatching. Well, obviously, if you've heard from the citizens here, like myself, because I am a taxpayer since '97, so I know what the taxes are here, but they're well worth it for all the services that are provided. It's also an officer safety issue, and I could just shoot several examples, one of which, let's say an officer's out there on the streets, makes a traffic stop, could be an afternoon shift or midnight shift, and obviously we got the MDCs in the car to run plates, run people to check their background and see if there's any warrants, but we also have to verify if an active warrant comes up on that driver, if somehow we've had problems with the MDCs before where you check them out in the beginning of the shift, you get out there and there's some glitches, maybe there's an update. So now you're out there, well, the only thing you got in the car is your radio system to communicate with dispatch. Well, at least when I was working since 2020, we'd have to verify the warrant through police dispatch. Now, if the Washtenaw County Central Dispatch is who we have to go through at those after hours, and they're tied up with a major event in Ypsi or Ypsi Township, they're going to low prioritize our calls out here. So it might be a point where that officer's trying to verify if that person has a warrant or not, and it could be an officer safety issue, but we can't find out because we're waiting on Central Dispatch. And there's also been times where Central Dispatch is not familiar with our area out here in Saline. I remember covering police dispatch when a dispatcher had to take a brief break, where the Central Dispatch was calling our department to locate, they would give us a random address, wanting to know if it was in the township or if it was in the city limits or not. So that's my concern, is the folks out there, and they do a bang-up job at Central Dispatch. My hat's off to the men and women that work there at that department. But the amount of calls that they take at that department versus over here, they just don't know the city like our dispatchers know. So please, listen to the public comment. Do not eliminate dispatch, not only for the citizen safety, but for every officer that's out there on the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Officer Dave. Appreciate your comments and hope you're enjoying your retirement. Well earned. There are additional citizen comments on agenda items.
Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kelly, and I'm a dispatcher here for the police department. Tonight, I'm representing myself as a citizen, not as an employee. Recently, I had a council member call me on the non-emergency line during my midnight shift for concerns of a family trouble. In this moment, I am speaking directly to you, council member. When you called, I answered. I took your information about your concerns and dispatched officers to the location, all within 5 minutes. If you want to continue to have the ability to have your call answered and dispatched quickly, you will make the decision not to eliminate your dispatchers. If you want to call and listen to, if this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911 or press 8. If this is a non-emergency matter, please press 8 or listen to the following options. Wait for a dispatcher to answer. Take your information, then dispatch out the call, which I promise will take more than 5 minutes. Then by all means, go ahead and eliminate your dispatchers. However, your citizens and your businesses will no longer receive the level of service they are used to, which was even stated by Rocky Noonan of Washtenaw County. Over the weekend, a council member posted on social media for the public that they operationally do not know how our dispatch center works. With that being said, in the time that I have worked here, which has been almost 2 years, not a single council member has been into dispatch to ask questions about what we do. Also, in terms of operation, Metro West and Metro East have a lot of radio traffic. When they go to emergency traffic, which means no one except the officers and that dispatcher can speak, what happens to the citizens of Saline and their calls? When we receive calls, they are immediately our priority, regardless of the type of call. Every call matters, and we have the ability to get them out without having to wait for emergency traffic to be lifted, because we are one-on-one with our officers. In regards to the unfortunate recent shooting, you state that this is one of the reasons why you want to consolidate dispatch. You state that Metro had to take over the radio traffic on a separate channel. It was not that our dispatcher could not handle it, but it was for the ability to have all of the jurisdictions together on one channel and communicate. If you are stating that our dispatchers cannot handle an emergency call like this, then essentially you are saying our officers cannot handle it either because they had help from other jurisdictions. You pride yourself on providing service to the businesses and citizens of Saline. Your mission statement of the police department is to ensure a welcoming, safe, and secure community for all. We shall perform our duties with a reverence for human life and in partnership with all community members through professionalism, respect, integrity, and dedication. If you wish to uphold this statement and continue to provide outstanding services for your community, you will do the right thing, which is to keep your dispatch services. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate your comments and your service. Any additional citizen comments on any of our agenda items?
Hi, Paula Bogleff, 354 Pembroke Drive. So my family and I moved here 2.5 years ago. One of the reasons that we chose Saline was the safety factor. I came from a township nearby that got rid of their own dispatch and went to central dispatch. I had quite a bit of crime in my area, although it was rural. A lot of concerning events happening. A couple of times my family was almost run off the dirt road by vehicles. There was a break-in at my home. Several things happened. I was there 25 years. This township used central dispatch, and it took forever to get someone to come out. And I mean forever. It was not a good situation. And so from my personal experience, I'm very disappointed to hear that this is going on here. And my vote is to keep our own dispatch here in Saline. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Appreciate your comments. Are there any additional citizen comments on agenda items this evening?
Hi, I'm Diane Faber. I'm a resident here. I grew up here. I'm an original Saline Hornet. And I just want to say that I know this is a financial decision. Cost is being considered. But as others, you've heard others say that, you can't really put a price tag on this kind of safety and security in a community. So if you're looking at cuts, won't you look at something there's must-have versus nice-to-have? I would say this is a must-have, not a nice-to-have. There may be other areas that you could cut that are maybe nice-to-have. I would also like to say that I was here in March, and I'm here 6 months later, and I haven't heard one community member step forward and say that they are, that they want the dispatch to be outsourced. 100% of everyone that spoke does not want it outsourced. They want it retained. I'm also one of those people. And it's really unfortunate, to Mrs. Hess's point, that I was surprised to hear that most of my friends from this community growing up here weren't aware of this, and my neighbor, 27 homes, nobody knew this was going on. I wish I had more time to get them involved, but I would say that you have quite a good representation of Saline's voice here in this community. And if you're looking for community representation and what we want, I think we've all spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items? Please, you have 3 minutes once you begin.
My name is Richard Edwards. This is concerning the August 3rd shooting at the UAW Hall. I was involved in that. I was the other man that got shot. Amber was shot. She was murdered. But I ran over to my truck and I grabbed my phone and I called the Saline Police Department and I talked to Lisa and I told her what was going on and to get somebody down here right away. And then after the conversation was over, there were all kinds of police officers there, cars, within minutes. But anyways, I found out later that my call to the Saline Police Department, from the time I called, they apprehended him 6 or 7 minutes later, which if I'd have called 911, they said it would have taken a lot longer. And then, like, people like that, you know, what are they going to be out on the street at night after hours? And, you know, I'm afraid to walk down the street. But anyways, I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. We appreciate that. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items?
Hi there, my name is Joanna Kokales. I'm not completely prepared for this tonight, however. I have flyers that have been hanging, as some of you know, with a restaurant that I run in Saline. I am also vice president of our association in my neighborhood that I live in. There have been numerous customers that I can honestly tell you that are not for removing this dispatch whatsoever. And you hear the idle chit-chat, and especially because the majority, as you all know, our customers are senior citizens. Also, there are quite a few single mothers that are living in my neighborhood. I am one of them. I am now an empty nester, and the fear that I have thinking that there won't be this availability to us is frightening. It has actually made me think of actually selling my house and leaving this area. I was from Ann Arbor. I can honestly say that I always had the luxury of knowing that we had the Ann Arbor Police Department, and to feel this as a single woman and mother and empty nester or anything else, or for any of my friends that are single, that are taking care of their elderly parents in our neighborhood, it's frightening. And so I hope that you honestly consider that, like somebody said, this is something that is a must. It's not something that should even be on any table of discussion. I think that we can find the cut somewhere. It's just a matter of everybody working as a village to find out where.
Thank you, Joanna. Appreciate it. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items?
My name is Lisa Bain. I'm a dispatcher. I'm not a private citizen, but she just spoke about the senior citizens. And the senior citizens are who are going to suffer mostly, because just 2 examples of my calls. I took 2 calls from Brecken Village, and one gentleman couldn't find his remote and was so distraught and so upset, and nobody would come and help him. So I found out his name, found out his apartment number or his number, got off the phone with him, went over and called Brecken Village, asked for the front desk, told them that this gentleman needed help. And it was something so simple, but you're not going to get that level because Metro Dispatch doesn't have the time. They have to get off the phone as soon as possible because they've got another phone waiting. They've got another call waiting. We have the time. We have the time to talk to Matt Rockwell. We have the time to talk to Mary Hess. We have the time to take that personal, and that's why I came here. That's why I came to work in a small city, so that I could give that to those people. So.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate your comments. Any additional citizen comments this evening on agenda items? No? Well, let me say a few things. We appreciate everyone's remarks and your attendance this evening. We're going to transition in just a moment to a presentation on Metro Dispatch Services and then a discussion and debate subsequent on tonight's agenda. I do want to reiterate that I think this is probably the 6th or 7th time we've discussed the matter at a public meeting. We did host a public town hall and open house this past spring, and many of my colleagues have engaged with our residents and business owners about this topic over the past year. The genesis for this, and many have made reference to this, is the fact that in 2013, the city of Saline, under the leadership of several of us on this council, myself and Mr. Gearbaugh included, spearheaded the adoption of a fund balance policy, which is indicative of any best practice and reflects an organization that puts a strong emphasis on appropriately managing its finances. Contained within that fund balance policy, it stipulates that the city should maintain a between 15 and 20% unrestricted fund balance. If it goes beyond that point, there's ways in which those dollars can be allocated. Conversely, if it dips below 15%, it requires staff and council to work on a corrective action plan. So I want to be clear that there's a number of cuts, consolidations, efficiencies being looked at to get the city back into that 15 to 20% threshold. I'd also note, separate from that, if anybody is ever interested in the inner workings of City Council, wants to stay abreast to the topics that we will be discussing and debating, I encourage you to go to our website and sign up for documents on demand. You'll be able to review our agendas, all the support material that goes to council. In fact, you'll be able to review it before council members are able to pick up their hard copies of their agenda and packets the Wednesday before council meetings. You can also review material from the Parks Commission, Planning, ZBA, all of the boards and commissions, decision-making bodies that fall within our municipal portfolio. So again, thank you for the comments this evening. We appreciate the passion and hopefully you will stick around for the subsequent discussion and presentation. With that, unless there's anything from my colleagues, City Manager O'Toole, can I turn it over to you to begin the presentation on Metro Dispatch Services?
Certainly. Before we begin, I'll just try and touch on a couple things that came up during those comments, which are not expressly described in the presentation. First, Saline Dispatch does not currently dispatch for fire and EMS, only police. There is no expected difference in the response or the pickup time for 911 calls between Saline Dispatch and Metro Dispatch. The number will still be 911. The person answering will still be a trained professional, and they will still have a direct connection to Saline Police. Another note, MSP's response time is not, in my opinion, a reflection of the response time for Saline officers. If an officer is available in this community, they will respond, and that's true whether the dispatching agency is local or metro. And nothing about what we're discussing here today is changes the number of officers that will be on duty at any given time. Still, we know it's not an easy move to consider valued members of our team leaving the organization. And I just want to make a note that there's nothing in this presentation that's intended to be a reflection on their excellent work or to diminish the service that they've provided to this community. So first and foremost, I wanted to share a little bit about the background. We've discussed already, Mayor, you shared your comments about how long this really has been in the making. The original recommendation came about in 2015, and that was from a third-party consultant that identified this as an opportunity not just for cost savings, but operational and safety efficiencies. And over the years, those benefits have not really changed. The same has been true consistently. What really triggered the conversation over the last 10 months especially has been our fund balance falling below 15%. There were a number of cost savings and revenue generating opportunities that were outlined in a December 2022 presentation, and I'm happy to share that many of those have since been implemented, and we do feel that we are getting closer to being on a more sustainable track, fiscally speaking. Since that cost savings recommendation at the end of 2022, staff has met pretty frequently with leadership from the County Emergency Services Division to design what scope of services might look like. We presented those initial findings during the March 2023 Town Hall, and we've continued to host meetings with them ever since, with the idea being that we would get to this point to consider a formal contract. And in fact, that contract was conceptualized when we also accounted for that type of savings in our FY24 budget. All in all, this was a decision 8 years in the making, and a lot of scrutiny and investigation has gone in, especially over the last 10 months. When approaching this investigation, the city had three main goals. The first was to consider providing services that continue to be exceptional in terms of emergency response and commensurate in terms of our non-emergency touch points. The second was to approach this implementation with a risk mitigation mindset, meaning that we move us to a position where we're better prepared for those low-frequency, high-risk events that might be multi-victim or multi-location. And last, that we really did induce a benefit that provides greater fiscal resilience for the city into the future. So on that issue of quality service, we looked both at emergency response and non-emergency response. As we mentioned in our March town hall, the majority of callers, those use a cellular device to contact 911. Those are already being routed to Metro Dispatch now and then being redirected back to our local dispatch. In the shift to Metro Dispatch, there would be no redirection. There would just be a Metro Dispatch answering the call and able to immediately dispatch Saline Police. Landline users would have a similar experience to what they have now. Dispatch would answer the call, they would take needed information and dispatch accordingly. We have found that Metro Dispatch is a highly professional organization, and they specialize in emergency response. They have extremely high training standards, a larger staff, and more exposure and experience to handling high-risk events. Both Saline and Metro use the same system to track past incidents, so they are aware of information about past callers, personal histories, what they've called about, and we expect that that level of information would be consistent across organizations. Further, all of our existing border agencies are on Metro Dispatch. So right now, Saline is on a bit of a communications island. Switching to Metro affords us an opportunity to improve regional collaboration with those neighboring public safety agencies.
You're a couple slides back. Oops, there you go. Nope.
Now, as we know, dispatch is not just about emergency calls. That's why both our local agency and Metro Dispatch operate a non-emergency call line. Some of the reasons that we see for calling non-emergency are related to reporting suspicious activity, water main breaks, road hazards, lost and found items, pets, things of that nature. In the switch to Metro Dispatch, the city would continue to operate its non-emergency line during regular business hours and transition to Metro Dispatch non-emergency after hours. Metro Dispatch will have primary points of contacts that are internal to our organization, for example, Public Works or the water wastewater system, and they would follow a similar process to calling out city staff in those instances. After hours, residents would have three options for connecting with city staff. They could call Metro Dispatch non-emergency, they can call the city's non-emergency line and leave a message, or they can use the call box that would be installed at the front desk of City Hall. So in addition to continuing to offer non-emergency calls, the city has considered how to best handle the issue of after-hours access. This is absolutely the area where we would expect to see the biggest change. Right now, you can walk up to the front desk of City Hall and someone sitting at dispatch can buzz you in pretty much any hour of the day. In the switch to Metro, you'd have to call the non-emergency line to have an officer dispatched to meet you to let you in. During an internal analysis of the after-hours use of City Hall conducted over an 8-month period, it was determined that after-hours traffic is particularly low, especially in the hours after our normal public meeting times. In many instances, those activities were either generally non-public or non-police related, could have been otherwise scheduled or planned ahead, or were administrative tasks that also could have been scheduled in advance or hosted on a different day. What's important to note in this process is that nothing changes officer availability. Officers will still be on duty and available to assist in the event they are dispatched to meet someone here. Additionally, the city still plans to continue hosting warming and cooling centers in event of extreme weather, and of course, hosting numerous public meetings after hours. So on the issue of cost efficiency, I will hand it over to Treasurer Cole.
Good evening. Thank you very much, City Manager O'Toole. As you stated, and also Mayor Marl stated, the recent trigger for this evaluation really started with our fund balance last year dipping below that 15%, which triggered and necessitated a corrective action plan be presented by myself and the city manager to council. As the city manager has mentioned, there have been several ideas that have been used from that and are being implemented. But I want to talk a little bit about the cost breakdown. We did, oh, did you just, sorry. Sorry, I thought you forwarded it. Can't see the screen from my angle. The current costs, we had a head-to-head comparison that we did where we largely focused on wages for local operations versus the contract costs. The switch to Metro is expected to net at least $170,000 annually in savings. This includes the net impact of hiring one new administrative employee to backfill clerical tasks currently performed by the dispatchers and to serve the community relations role. Of note, in one year time, there will be one-time fees for things like installation of exterior call box and relocating equipment. However, all of these are viewed as general nominal costs that do not create a substantive amount when considering long-term impacts to our general fund.
Thank you, Treasurer Cole. Moving on to our third goal, which was risk mitigation, I'd like to ask Chief Radzik to share her comments.
So as you can imagine, I am in a very bad seat with this because I do appreciate our dispatchers. However, being the chief of police, I also have to, I always say you see the agency in the seat you sit in. Some of these, I'll comment on some of the questions you asked, but this has been a recommendation since 2015. And coming on as the chief, that was the first question I received by many of the dispatchers because I came from the county. Oh, you just want to move on to Metro Dispatch. No, at the time I didn't. As time goes on, I see, however, when I look, Mylan went to Metro Dispatch July of last year. And just that capability to talk to one another, being on the same radio channel. I hear many people comment about value and safety, and that's one of the things that I look at when you have officers out there. I think Officer Ringe had, retired Officer Ringe had mentioned about being on a traffic stop. If you're all on the same channel and you're listening, when you look at our bordering jurisdictions, we have York Township, Lodi Township, Pittsfield Township, and Saline Township. All of them are on Metro Dispatch. So there's that capability to hear what your officers are doing and to be able to respond before a dispatcher calls another jurisdiction to say, my officer needs backup. That's outside of campus. U of M, Department of Public Safety, and EMU and WCC is not on Metro Dispatch because they have different needs. Being campus police. Again, the multi-location, multi-victim response. Our dispatcher did a phenomenal job when we had the homicide here in Saline. However, that is a lot to put on one dispatcher when you have one dispatcher working, answering 911 calls, answering non-emergency calls, because I believe the first call that came in that day from the victim was a non-emergency number. It wasn't to 911 to get transferred over here. The phone kept ringing, and this is one person who has to worry about officer safety, has to worry about coordination with responding jurisdictions, and has to be concerned with getting the victim medical treatment, as well as the officer's safety with getting vehicle description, path of where they traveled. And again, she did a phenomenal job doing all of that. But I always go back to that low-frequency, high-risk incidents and being the chief and worrying about public safety, my officer's safety. That's a concern of mine if you have one dispatcher working in dispatch. Quality emergency and non-emergency communications, as we stated previously. I don't know if people know this looking at what was posted on Facebook, but if you're in the city of Saline and you call 911 on your cell phone, it's going to Metro Dispatch, and Metro Dispatch transfers that call, if it is within the city limits, to Saline. So 911 is not going away. Also frees up opportunity to ensure continuity of other services. I keep listening to people who talk about 1970 and, don't want to do the long-distance dialing. What do you do if you call after 9 p.m.? If we're not growing here up with what is happening in the city, we're getting a hotel. I mean, it just seems since I've lived in Saline for 26 years, we're growing. And I think we need to grow with it. And some of the more recent staff that I've heard from that went to Metro Dispatch from Milan, one of the things that they did say was how the partnership between the officers and listening to what's going on the radio and getting backup when needed is more streamlined and more fluid. So.
Any council questions or specific topics you felt we did not touch on?
Let me start to my left and then to my right this evening. Councilmember Rice, can I start with you? Any questions for the city manager, police chief, or city treasurer?
I have a lot. But these are all conversations that we've had in the past. I just want to reiterate some things for the public's benefit. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight and for voicing concerns and opinions online. Hearing what's going on out in the community is a #1 priority for me. It's very helpful to understand how these services are being utilized. It brings a lot of information into this discussion tonight. I do want to state for the record that what I'm going to do right now, I did ask to have this forum in a public meeting outside of a council meeting. I take some of that lack of transparency on my own, but I will say I agree with the community. There was a bit of a lack of transparency simply because we weren't talking about it. It's not that it wasn't happening behind the scenes, but we were not talking about it. So I will take some of that fault on my own, and I will place some of that on city staff as well, just simply because operationally they were still working on the contract. There are certain things that we can't discuss in public, but could we have done better? Absolutely. Secondly, the questions that I want to ask tonight, I have already discussed with the city manager and with the police chief, but I want to discuss them again for the benefit of the public. I was the Facebook commenter who said that I didn't understand the answer to the question of whether or not mobile calls were then sent to Saline Dispatch. I also reiterated that I understood how the process worked, I just didn't want to speak out of turn at that moment. So please, if you're going to have conversations, tell the whole conversation, as I do. I'm very open and honest with everyone. So let's have an open and honest conversation, and please listen to the questions that I have for the chief and for the city manager. With that said, safety first. Safety is my #1 priority. Don't care about the money, do care about the money, but care about safety of this town. Can you please elaborate more, Chief Radzik, on the process that took place during the August homicide? I love what you've said about our dispatcher who took the initial call, but when something like that happens, these high-impact events, how can Metro Dispatch help us coordinate those things and take some of that pressure off of the dispatcher? What does that look like to the community?
Well, probably the best example right now I can give is not necessarily that incident, but when I came here to Saline, I started exploring, when I found out that we weren't getting 911 funds, I had a meeting with Metro Dispatch because it's very easy to geofence and then we could take our own 911 calls and get that money. It was explained to me and it just took one time and I thought, okay, that's why we're not going to do this. And that is if there was an active shooter, say at Liberty School, those calls coming in is too much for one person to handle and do the coordination. When Metro Dispatch took over that incident on August 3rd, they ended up, our dispatcher had already started the coordination, but, and again, it was an anomaly that we were having active shooter training at the high school. People were close by, but getting that out on the radio when all the surrounding jurisdictions could hear the same radio traffic instead of, normally our dispatcher would have to relay that either on 81com or call Metro, which with these calls coming in, as I was running out, I just heard the phone ring and ring and ring. So just the coordination of those, the messages getting out, the direction of travel, and then hearing, and it was, I think, 6 to 9 minutes that he was in custody. Thankfully, because our dispatcher was able to get the vehicle description, but once that got out and Metro took over and all the surrounding agencies heard that and saw the vehicle going down South Ann Arbor Street and flipped around and stopped them, it's really the coordination of the communication and the message that's getting out to the responding officers.
Would you kind of classify this as a worst-case scenario, but
Absolutely.
best opportunity for us to see how Metro could help us?
Yes, and I hope in my time here that we don't have something like that happen again. But again, that's what I say keeps me up at night is these low-frequency, high-risk incidents.
Can you talk for a moment about Milan? I know that they had already switched to Metro when they had their tornado incident, and I know that you've talked to the chief over there and how they said that was a big help in coordinating their efforts as well in rescue from that tornado.
Yes, but for, that was actually straight line winds.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, straight line winds.
I just had to correct that because.
My colleagues at the National Weather Service are shaking their heads.
Yeah, no, they got all upset when people were saying it was a tornado. So, yeah, it was just, again, being able to talk to the surrounding counties, although were they at Metro Dispatch at that point?
No, that was the reason why they decided to move to.
Okay, right,
because they
yeah,
weren't able to
yes.
handle it.
I was going, yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And I lived through the Dexter tornado and just the coordination with dispatch and, getting everybody coming, state police as well, was helpful. Because they, Dexter's kind of limited with their contract and how many deputies are on duty.
You and I talked last week about emergency procedures for folks needing immediate help on foot, and City Manager O'Toole went over this a bit about putting in the emergency box outside. Have you had any additional conversations, either City Manager O'Toole or Chief Redzik, with the fire department or with your officers on what that procedure would look like if someone came here, called the call box, Washtenaw County dispatched somebody to here, or if they felt unsafe outside of that call box, can they go knock on the fire department door? Is there another opportunity for someone to help physically in that very moment without having to wait a minute or two for an officer dispatched?
So one of the things we discussed is also keeping the vestibule open so that there is a small temporary shelter for anyone who is seeking it. We have not had any formal conversations with SAFD in terms of how our officers would respond. That would just be a written procedures document from the chief as a directive to staff. But typically, the process would be, if it follows the same in the other communities, Metro Dispatch would contact them, let them know that an individual needed them at the front of City Hall. In many cases, there may be an officer already here on site, simply doing administrative work. The idea is that as a small community, an officer would not be far away.
I would like to see that conversation happen with SAFD if possible. Just an informal standard operating procedure. If someone knocks on their door, I think currently, or at least in the past, that door has said, like, this building's not manned, we're not here, don't knock on the door. That's a really terrible way of summarizing it, but if we could have a more formal conversation with the chief, that would be, I think, helpful to, then we can talk to the community members and say, your first stop is the box, dispatch Washtenaw, but if, by all means, heaven forbid, someone's actually following you, they're knock on the door, and they can lock the door behind you. You can't lock the vestibule behind you. Okay, so that's safety. I have a couple more questions on finance and then one about jobs, and then I'll pass over to my council colleagues for their time as well. I just want to point out that in this presentation it said that the council adopted the budget, and we did assume in that budget that dispatch was going to be transitioned. However, that did not mean that we approved it. As Treasurer Cole has discussed, there are other things that have taken place. There are other things that we've talked about. Should we come out of this tonight and say absolutely not, we'll have to go back to the drawing board. So this is not an assumed, we're saying yes to this tonight until we get all of our questions answered, but it was assumed in that budget itself. The numbers assumed that. So I just want to reiterate that to the community, that we had no preconceived notions at the beginning of the budgeting process. The last 6 to 8 months have given us more information that we could make this decision. Can you talk a little bit more about Metro's equipment? I think this is probably for the chief, and the savings and, keeping up with, day-to-day operations of dispatch, keeping up with technology. I don't think we put necessarily like constant equipment updates into the savings, or did we account for that as well?
We did not include equipment updates in the estimated savings. There's actually a fair number of things that weren't estimated in the savings simply because it was hard to get to a hard number, and we did not want to present any information that we did not have the absolute facts behind.
And when we pay Metro this predetermined contract amount, all of those types of things, training, equipment, essentially comes off of our plate, and they handle that.
Correct. It's a lump sum contract.
With that, the 15-month contract that we are looking at today is only a 15-month contract, which is very disappointing. I would like to look at this as more of a long-term thing, but I do understand that Metro is currently going through an assessment. Can we talk for a moment about the potential of this going up after the 15-month contract? And if it goes up to an unsustainable amount, it may not, but if it goes up to an unsustainable amount and council says, whoa, this is not what we agreed to 15 months ago, what does it look like to get dispatched back to Saline?
So as with any contract, the city treasurer and I would perform a cost-benefit analysis to determine whether it still made sense, financially speaking, to move forward with that service. And of course, after that period of time, also to assess whether we feel that Metro Dispatch has provided a level of service that we're satisfied with. We do that with all of our contracts on a pretty regular basis. We did build into the contract language for transition in the event that we were displeased. And that gives us, their normal contract language was 30 days. We built in 120 so that the city was prepared in the event we had a transition.
Okay, thank you. Treasurer Cole, very briefly, could you just give a couple of examples of those other cost benefit things that we've discussed?
So as far as what we've calculated in the cost savings of $170,000, it is largely focused on wages. That was something that is a set amount that we could use as a basis that was kind of unfeasible as to the amount of cost of the wages for dispatchers that was going into dispatch. So we also had $37,000 approximately in communication fees. We didn't put that in the calculation per se, but just as of note, we knew that that would be going away. But largely, again, it was wages and fringes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. One final question regarding money, and then I have one more about jobs. This is probably for Chief Radzik. So one of the questions that is coming out of this, and is going to continue to come out of this, is we are doing this as a way of getting back over our 15% threshold. Let's say we do even better. You know, we have a new city treasurer, we have a new city manager. We're doing a lot better with our finances these days. Say, you know, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, what is your plan for potentially upstaffing the police force with this savings?
Well, again, like I've said, we've got a hotel going in. We just seem to keep growing as a city, and, you know, we need to keep up. So it wouldn't be a big surprise if in a year or so, you know, I come in front of council and ask for additional patrol officers. And we are in the process of running a promotional process. So that's, you know, going to even add to wanting to replace whoever would be promoted if they're ready to be promoted to fill that spot as well.
So if I can add to that too, because I failed to respond, there was a question about why has the PD public safety budget specifically increased so much over the last few years. And then a little bit of that is related to, we added an additional staff person. We went from kind of sitting at one sergeant for a prolonged period of time to finally filling that second sergeant's position. Fire services have increased by over 30% in that time. So really it is wages, it is fringe, and it is retiree costs that are hitting that public safety budget heavily, and will continue to do so in the years ahead as we continue to grow.
So I'll end my questioning here with some talk about jobs. Y'all do a wonderful job. One of the reasons why we moved back to this area after living in Washington, D.C., and my spouse retiring from the military was because this is a great small town with great services and great people and people who take care of each other. So I get it. This might be one of the harder decisions I'll ever have to make as a counselor because it's a human impact decision. Those are the hard decisions. But I want to talk for a moment, please, as much as you can, and talk to us about this, Chief. What has Metro offered to dispatchers as far as getting the application process in? You expressed to me that they told them to go ahead and apply. They'll keep their applications on file, get their background checks done, and if and when this transition's over, and if there are jobs available at Metro, they would kind of be the first in line for interviews should all of that go through accurately. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I've been very transparent with our staff from day one of these talks. Having worked with our staff in Metro, Metro is hiring, and I think it was last week when I found out that this was going to be on the agenda, started having those conversations, and the leadership at Metro Dispatch has already made it known that they can kind of streamline this process as far as, even though if we decide to go with Metro Dispatch, even though we have our dispatchers still employed here working at Saline, they can apply. They will run them through the process, whatever their process looks like. I know they do a background and whatever else is required, and they could actually get a conditional job offer if they pass whatever it is that they require at the county, and that way they're not losing time. It could be a seamless transition over to Metro.
And then about this community liaison position that you're looking at, I took a gut punch when someone discussed that this is a union busting effort. I'm in a union, and I understand that sentiment, and that hadn't occurred to me. So I want to talk about the community liaison position and what you all envision that to be for the community. What is the community benefit of that position? I don't necessarily need to talk about the administrative work that's going to happen, but what are we paying for here?
Sure. Really, that position is intended to be the first face that you see when working with Saline PD. So it's someone who would still be stationed at that front desk, who is more familiar with police activities and the goings-on of that department, and can help anyone coming to the front desk with issues that are pertinent to Saline Police. There are some clerical tasks that are currently filled by dispatchers. Those would transition, and this would be your primary point of contact. But really, by and large, we feel that this position is probably one that will have the most interface with the average resident, simply because of some of that paperwork, the permitting, and the processes that they would be responsible for.
Will they sit at that desk?
Yes.
And in your description of this position, you had mentioned that there's perhaps weekend hours as well. Is that still in conversation about like the needs within this building or the needs of the community?
Yes, I mean, one thing that we've always talked about operationally is if there is a way to have city services available in off hours. We've floated around the idea of moving even admin staff to 4-day weeks to have after hours availability. So in creating this new position, we felt that it would be prudent to at least offer 1 day a month that had those after-hour options, for those individuals that simply cannot break away from a 9 to 5.
And I don't know if this is appropriate to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and you can tell me what why non-union versus union?
The tasks that were listed in the job description are largely administrative. During the last contract cycle, the administrative assistant position was removed from the contract. It's no longer represented by the bargaining unit. It's that simple.
So do you see this as a replacement of that position in a way?
No, that position still exists. We view this as similar to that in terms of it being administrative in nature. Yeah.
Okay. That is all I have. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I hope I addressed some of the things that some folks had discussed online, and I thank my colleagues for sitting quietly while I mumble over here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice. We appreciate those questions. Also, just to respond to, I think it was your fifth to last question about cost savings and the opportunity for additional revenue, please note that we will be discussing other opportunities in the next 30 to 60 days specific to Saline Parks and Rec, the Rec Center, and also changes to downtown parking. So our opportunities, our list of opportunities, there are several items that still exist and will be actively explored by council and staff in the ensuing weeks. Councilmember Del Orco, do you have questions for the city manager, police chief, or city treasurer?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to follow up on the last conversation that Councilmember Rice was addressing. This, to me, is new information triggered by Mr. Hiller's comments about this being a union-busting effort. And at first, I dismissed the comments because I know that Metro Dispatch is a union organization and that the jobs are moving to a union setup. I was not aware at the time that I voted to approve the budget that the full-time position being created to fill the shoes of the face of the organization for dispatch would be a non-union position. I don't recall coming across any information previously to now that that was the case. When I look at the job description for the full-time position, answering and directing non-emergency phone calls during regular business hours, maintaining physical presence at the front desk for walk-in support, entering personal protection orders, gun registry, and sex offender registry. If implemented, monitoring online parking enforcement system. In my estimation, this is still police work and not characteristic of an office administrator. I have wrestled with many of the issues and nuances around this matter. I can certainly see the merits in moving in the direction. I visited Metro Dispatch personally. I saw that they're professionally equipped to handle much higher volume calls There's a team of people on staff ready to move this organization forward. But as a person that has established the cornerstone of my tenure on council as someone that defends blue-collar workers and represents the unions, I need to insist that this job be created under the collective bargaining agreement.
So ultimately, that decision would have to come through a negotiation with the collective bargaining agreement. I can't, in a vacuum, say that a position is now the unit's to represent, but I can't imagine the unit would be opposed. I just want to reiterate, administrative staff typically are not represented by the police officers' labor council.
I understand, but in my estimation, this is not an administrative position based on the job description. And that can be ironed out through HR's just interpretation of it, but at the end of the day, they're doing a lot of the same things the dispatch officers are doing now, and they are in the union.
If I may, because I confirmed this with the police chief earlier today, if there is a motion and there is majority support for consolidating to Metro Dispatch, there will be several items that will come back to City Council for discussion and debate, one of which would include this new position. And if you wanted to have a conversation at that time on how that individual or individuals would be classified, either non-union or union, that can certainly be done.
Moving on, I see, I wanted to ask Chief Radzik, is it the case that you personally feel that this is the, moving to Metro Dispatch is the best way forward for the city of Saline?
For all the reasons that I stated previously about officer safety, the fact that we are only one of two left that are not with Metro Dispatch, as many times as we have gone down this path, I wasn't here at the time, but I've heard, I'm just concerned that that door is going to close if we don't make a decision on moving to Metro Dispatch. And it won't be an opportunity for us to revisit.
Okay. So you do feel it's the best way forward?
I do.
Okay. So I have to take everything into consideration when making a decision as important as this. And hearing all of the taxpayers here tonight express their concerns around moving to Metro Dispatch, I feel, I hear you, I'm listening to you, and I want everyone to understand that there may be a lot of anxiety around this, and we have to look to other communities that have moved in this direction and what their experiences of this have been. And we, as council members, must take direction from the experts employed in this position to give us the best and most sound advice to move the city forward. And it's very difficult to say no to the chief of police when they're advocating for us to move in this direction, because I defer to that individual as the person that has the best knowledge of what's best for public safety. I have one more question related to Ann Arbor's experience with Metro Dispatch and why they might be considering moving to Livingston County, and what if their experience has been negative, if anybody has any knowledge of why Ann Arbor is leaving Metro Dispatch.
To our knowledge, there's no official decision. I mean, I can't speak for their staff, but the City Council of Ann Arbor has not voted to leave Metro Dispatch. I don't believe they've had any public conversations, to my knowledge. They just renewed their contract for 1 year. We did have an opportunity, our chief had an opportunity to speak with their chief. It sounds as if there are some current concerns about the reporting related to Metro Dispatch, the increasing price this last year. And were there any other specific concerns that arose? Yeah, largely the reporting of outcomes from Metro Dispatch and the recent increase of price. It went up 9% this past year.
For Ann Arbor?
Yes.
Okay. So that could place us in a similar position 15 months from now, and if we let our dispatch go now, we might not be able to get that back.
Well, for context, we just got information about our benefits, and healthcare is expected to go up 7%, and the contract already calls for a 3% increase. So right there, we would have already been experiencing, before any other inflation, a 10% increase.
Okay. And one last question, real quick. With the estimated cost for $20,000 for overhead, training, things of that nature, I'm trying to understand, because I remember a conversation addressing Act 32, State of Michigan grant, funding some of this. Do we get reimbursed for those costs through Act 32?
Correct. Some of the costs are reimbursed, but like mileage, meals for individuals going to that training, and anything that's not already expressly covered by that reimbursement would be included. But that number also includes equipment, software licenses, membership fees, kind of tangential to any individual employee of the city.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Gearbaugh, any questions for the chief, city manager, or treasurer? And again, please note that when we get to new business, we will have ample time to discuss the merits, the potential benefits, and ramifications of this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, that was what I was going to say, was I just have questions. And I'll make a statement later. Regarding some of the statements made tonight from our public and those, do you feel there's any issues that you would like to address further, or feel that there could be a better clarification for it, considering one was mentioned by a former officer regarding warrants and the processing of that and response? Was your comment about MSP, the response from them is their issue, not necessarily ours?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
There was a clarification about when they were in the call that they were feeling they were getting a better response related to warrants from our dispatch than they would get from, say, Metro dispatch. That type of process, how would that differ in a situation? Or are you aware of anything that would be that concern for you?
No, I mean, they run people through the computer system and it will come up that there's a warrant. I think what he was talking about was running that person themselves on the MDC, and sometimes there's a glitch. That's the in-car computer, but if you're running it through dispatch, they're giving you the same information that you would see on your MDC if you ran that person.
So is there a technology issue that could be resolved as a result of that to prevent that from happening, or is that a known?
Well, we recently went through the process of upgrading all of our in-car computers.
Okay. So that's addressed some of that. Thank you. And as you've mentioned, we talk about savings and everything that we have. I mean, I don't expect to see the savings except redirected back into our police force. And as you've indicated, we've negotiated contracts in the last year in both cases, and we basically provided more benefits in terms of hybrid pensions and address certain things like that. Those costs are not going to be decreasing, and you just kind of mentioned that right now. So how would we achieve if we are not going to find savings in other situations, except by reducing staffing or services in other areas?
Well, I think as you recall, that cost savings presentation didn't include just this one item. There are a number of opportunities that we have identified, some of which have already been implemented and we've been successful with, others which we still need to have additional conversations around. But you're absolutely right. We do expect the cost to continue to grow at a relatively similar pace that they have in the past, especially with the community continuing to grow.
And do we feel that we can keep up with the retention, retention and competition with other organizations or other communities within our area?
I mean, I think that's a broader question of modern policing. It is becoming increasingly more difficult to attract new individuals into that line of work. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that.
No, I mean, it's a nationwide crisis right now with hiring police officers and retention.
And haven't we had difficulty retaining and bringing on dispatchers that stayed with us or have left, or even in our case, I know from the last 3 police chiefs that I've worked with, each one has experienced a difficulty with trying to maintain that, even if we threw more money at it. The issue ends up being training, the ability to continue that, the ability to backfill, to maintain those positions and all that. So at that point in time, we're burning out our officers by trying to backfill with that, and in certain cases, doubling our expenses as a result of using officers that are 2 or 3 times more, getting time and a half and so forth. So that cost has continued to increase as long as we've had that kind of problem.
Yes, that's correct. We often do not have full coverage for our dispatch center and have to backfill with.
Well, we've had sergeants sitting up in dispatch at different times. However, now we are fully staffed with for full-time dispatchers, and we have part-time dispatchers that have supplemented that. But when we were down one dispatcher, yes, there were times that an officer would sit and dispatch.
So this would be the first time that we probably have achieved this in many years?
I've only been here 3, so I'm not sure as far as staffing and dispatch.
So basically, right now, we're at a benefit or a high that we don't know if we can maintain.
Correct.
I guess with that, I'll pass there's been so many other questions asked, and I'll pass to my other colleagues.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, questions for the city manager, police chief, or city treasurer?
Thank you. My focus is just going to be on the safety aspect. So I'm going to start with the public side of safety. And I think it's directed for the police chief, which is what we've heard and seen a lot of is individuals who have situations in which they require frequent interaction with our dispatchers, with our police. They've got a relationship, and it appears that there's a fear that when dispatch goes away, so does that relationship, and which is going to therefore reduce their personal safety. How do we assure those people as to that we are maintaining safety for them?
Well, I think for starters, the fact that we are currently on the Clemis system, and that, so as we noted before, you can pull up, an address or a name and see what kind of contact we have had with that person. Now, what I can say is, yes, this is going to look different because our dispatchers now have the time to spend a half an hour on the phone talking to a disgruntled neighbor because their dog's barking. But again, Metro Dispatch is an emergency call center. So if it's, somebody that has a conditional bond or a restraining order or a PPO, when they call 911 and explain what's going on, that is going to triage to the top. If, say, the assailant is at the person's house or a place of work, that's not going to go away. And our officers, still to this day, if they hear a certain address that they're accustomed to going to, it's the officers that are responding out to the location, and they're very familiar with our community, very familiar with people who are calling frequently and what issues are going on at that residence or apartment complex.
Thank you very much. My second question regarding safety is from the internal aspect of it, which is our dispatchers. What we've talked about a lot are people in distress that come here that seek shelter. What protection is there for our dispatchers that person that they are fleeing from is not going to come here and put our dispatchers, in danger? That piece is an aspect that at times when there was a dispatcher here, if there was an officer here, it was sort of a combination. If you're not going to see that, and which we don't now for the most part because we've got more out on the road, so there's a personal safety issue for our dispatchers at that point. And so by moving to dispatch, moving over to Washtenaw Dispatch, are we then creating a different situation? Are we eliminating a situation of risk? Because that's the piece that it does seem like the city is providing a high-risk situation that we can harbor people here when our dispatchers don't necessarily have the full resources for those situations.
That's correct, and there's always been a concern with, the dispatchers currently, at what time they lock those front doors. I know that's come up a few times, and that is because after hours of darkness, if there's nobody around, if an officer's not in the station, then they may not feel safe. And once again, this will come back to a later conversation and something brought to council, because however we structure that front desk, we probably will be asking for something to make it a little more safe than the way you open up the front sliding window.
Thank you very much.
No additional questions, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
Not at this time.
Very good. Councilmember Seo, any questions for the city treasurer, police chief, or city manager?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have very few questions based on the questions already addressed to you folks by my colleagues down at the far end of the table. And Mrs. Rice is very adept questioning, I think, to allow the public a little more insight into what all is going into this. I guess I too want to echo what I heard Ms. Rice say, and that is very much appreciate all you folks coming here tonight, spending the time and effort to come forward, and in some cases, speak from the heart about how you feel about the dispatch service. Please don't think that that falls on deaf ears. We all appreciate that, but please appreciate the fact, too, that we're faced with a very difficult decision. And we'll probably make a decision based more on the cold facts of what we believe are the best thing to do for the majority of the public. I know we had a neighborhood meeting where I live last Sunday evening, and the first question that we asked was, what is it you folks want to see from city council? And the first thing that came up was lower my taxes. And I said, well, we're in a position that we'll be happy if we don't have to raise your taxes. And we're making every effort we can to do what we can to streamline the operations to prevent that from happening. So I think people are willing to give up a few of these things. And believe me, I understand the comfort. I understand the extra care that you, ladies and gentlemen, provide through your personal knowledge of the citizens and the efforts you make on their behalf. I've worked personally with some of you and know for a fact the kind of care and comfort you've provided to people when they come into the front desk. And that's all I have.
Very good. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, questions for city staff, specifically the city manager, treasurer, police chief?
Yes, I'll also be brief since we've covered a lot by this point. And I've heard many compelling arguments for keeping dispatch. We've been very fortunate to have such caring, professional personnel, and my family has experienced a positive situation with dispatch and the officer that came out. So I see the value in that, and it was one of the reasons why I moved here 24 years ago. Thank you for coming and expressing your passion. I do have a question for the city manager and treasurer. So I know we performed a thorough analysis for cuts that we could make. Were there any other potential options? I know it might be multiple that could provide the savings that we're looking at from switching to Metro Dispatch.
So when performing the cost-benefit analysis, one of the things we looked at was, could it be a cost savings and can it be provided at a commensurate level through some other means? And no, in our analysis, we could not find another service that if eliminated currently, we could outsource at a cost savings. We looked at everything from lawn mowing services to leaf collection services. All of those things would be more costly to outsource. This was identified as one of only really a few opportunities to both save money and provide a similar level of service. So unless we're very interested in flat out eliminating services of the city, I would say that this is still one of our very best bets in terms of long-term operational cost savings. And one thing I will add too is we cannot look at one-time savings. We can really only look at savings that have that recurring benefit to us on an operational level to ensure that that gap is filled in future years.
Okay, thank you. And then Chief Resnick, you had mentioned that this opportunity, if we were to wait, may not be available in the future to go to Metro Dispatch. Are there other, would we have to go to a different county then if it were to come up in the future? Or is this really our best bet as far as what's available for a consolidated dispatch service?
I just don't see operationally how a different jurisdiction, like I know Livingston County was mentioned, how they can actually dispatch for the city. So I think our only option, if we're not going to keep it in-house, would be contracting with Metro Dispatch.
Okay. This is a really hard decision. And safety is very important. I'm sorry, that's all that I have.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Kamara-Sulak. This would be a question for the chief and perhaps the city manager. Can you reiterate for the public's benefit that if one of the subsequent motions is adopted and Saline Dispatch is absorbed into Washtenaw County, when would be the effective start date of that change?
April 2nd of 2024.
Okay. So between the two of you, can you comment briefly on how you would manage that transition between today and early August 2024 if there's an affirmative vote to consolidate into Metro Dispatch?
Sure. Well, I think the first step would be encouraging our existing dispatchers, both full-time and part-time, to pursue employment opportunities with Metro Dispatch, knowing that having that level of service and the people with those knowledge at Metro would be a benefit to the community as a whole. But additionally, we would be looking at some sort of relationship to try and retain that staff until that time if they decided not to go to Metro Dispatch. So that would be a subsequent conversation with council if and when that type of opportunity presented itself. And on the operational side of things, is there anything more specific you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I just, my fear is that people would, if they know their job is going away, would leave. So, we can what if that all day long, but I don't know if it's some type of incentive to get, people to stay until they transition. Hopefully, if they wanted to go to Metro Dispatch, and if they don't, then hopefully it'll stay a seamless transition until April 2nd.
So thank you for that. So apart from a possible incentive, apart from approving an employment contract for a future employee or employees, determining the employment status either at will or union, and finalizing details for either a phone or a call box on the exterior of the building or in the front lobby. Are there additional details that staff, council would need to work through during that interim period? Again, if the consensus is to move forward and consolidate into Metro Dispatch.
I think by and large, we've identified what the roles and responsibilities between Saline and Metro Dispatch would be. There would be an opportunity then to take that and turn it into formally documented written procedures for our staff so that all staff was brought up to speed on those expectations. But largely, I think what you outlined is the bulk of the work that still needs to be completed.
Very good. That's all I had. There will be another additional opportunity to ask questions when we get to the new business portion of our agenda. Chief Radzik, City Manager O'Toole, Treasurer Cole, is there anything else you'd like to add at this time pertaining to your formal presentation PowerPoint on Metro Dispatch?
No, thank you.
No, and my apologies. Deputy Chief Hartwig, I failed to introduce you at the top of tonight's agenda, or rather during this special presentation. Is there anything that you'd like to add for the record? Okay, very good. Well, hang tight because there might be a question best addressed by you when we get to the new business portion of the agenda. Thank you very much. We now proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
I'd move the consent agenda is distributed.
Okay, and seconded by Gearbaugh. So it's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Gearbaugh to approve the consent agenda as submitted. Hearing no discussion or objection, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 23-199, County Dispatch Agreement. The first motion will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and Police Chief Radzik.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge receipt. Was that a second by CO?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Again, I would defer to city staff. You had obviously ample opportunity just moments ago to discuss this matter, but if you'd like to reiterate anything for the public record or for council's benefit, we would welcome that at this time.
Certainly. So this action item is specific to the contract itself, so some notes on the contract. It is a 15-month contract, the idea being to align it with both agencies' fiscal years so that new contracts renew on July 1 of each year. The total cost for that 15-month period is $135,975. This is within what we had anticipated. In fact, the annual cost is precisely what the county had quoted us almost a year ago. So some pretty consistent pricing on their part in terms of what the expectation for them would be.
Very good. Thank you, City Manager O'Toole. Police Chief Radzik, is there anything that you would like to add? No, easy enough. Well, again, your second opportunity for questions for staff. Again, let me start to my left and end to my right. Councilmember Rice, do you have any questions regarding the memo provided by the City Manager and Police Chief?
No questions, but I do have a statement that I'd like to make to the community. Again, reiterating that the stories that I've heard and the people that I've met along the way have impacted me in making this decision. However, even if the police chief told me that this was going to cost us more and it was going to keep us safer, I would still vote safety all day, every day. I understand the relationships that have been built with this community. I'm a proponent of building relationships. I work my butt off to build relationships in this community, and I know that you guys have done the exact same thing. This is not reflective of our current dispatch services. This is reflective of modernizing policing, taking advantage of the systems that are already in place that are being used throughout the county to keep us safe as things change. We have a very deep-seated community, and I understand that. And I understand that things have been the way that they've been and they've worked. But going into the future, if I hear from the police chief that she feels that it will work better to do this, she is the expert, as my colleague pointed out, and I will always side with our safety leadership. So I do intend to vote yes on this issue tonight. I would like to continue to have conversations as this progresses, as things happen throughout the community. Please bring them to us. Please let us know. This is a 15-month contract. We can look at it again in 15 months. I know that would be super painful. I don't want to do that. I want this to work out, but I do want to hear from you if things aren't working out. Please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice. Of course, you're welcome to provide a statement, Mr. Delarico, but ideally at this time it's questions for the city manager, police chief, or staff, and if there is a subsequent motion offered, there will be ample time for each of my colleagues to provide a statement or some perspective on this particular issue.
Well, I'm just going to follow up with my own statement in that I certainly see the merits of this, and there's plenty of good reasons to open up our minds to the idea of Metro Dispatch being able to serve us to the capacity that we're needed. But I am going to have to vote no because of my concerns around the city's intent to make this a full-time position, a non-union position. So.
Again, this motion is not related to that position. I do want to make that distinction. The creation of any new positions does require a separate council action.
Right, I understand that, but this commits us to the path of moving in this direction with the understanding of a community relations specialist being defined as an administrative position, which I cannot support.
The reference to the community relations position was made solely to be able to describe the cost savings. So the cost savings of approximately $170,000 a year is shown net of that. So it does assume that if you're using that as a cost savings number, some position would be created.
Right, but the cost savings is predicated on whether that position is a union position or a non-union position.
It is not.
How is that not the case? Would it not be more if it was a union position?
No, we use the same wages.
I don't see how that's possible.
The average of the average current dispatcher makes between $24 and $25 an hour. We use $25 an hour to estimate this rate, this position. And we use the existing fringe benefits of approximately 38 or 39% to estimate, because that's pretty consistent across most administrative staff as well. And one of the things that the city has done a great job of doing is trying to create parity between all of our departments. And to that end, really what we've created is a system of fringe benefits that's fairly equal across both union and non-union staff.
Matthew, I'm going to just give one last warning. No more interruptions. Please continue, Mr. Delrico.
I don't have anything further.
Out of here, even our police force that.
No, Matthew, I don't want to kick anybody out, but I want you to be respectful and allow us to continue to have our debate and discussion without interruption. Mr. Delrico, please continue.
I don't have anything further.
Let me ask this question as a follow-up to Mr. Delrico's statement. I'm not advocating for this. I want to preface, but if in fact Mr. Delrico has concerns about the position not being a union position, acknowledging, of course, what you said, then would he not seek to postpone the motion and then have staff come back with an actual contract that designates the position as a union employee?
Again, that's a matter that's for discussion between the city and the collective bargaining unit itself. These two are separate issues, the contract with Metro Dispatch and the creation of that position and whether it's represented by the bargaining unit. If it is council's direction, you could provide me direction now to communicate with the representatives of that unit to see if they would accept a position of that nature.
Okay. So maybe when we get to the subsequent motion.
I'd like to see that in writing before I vote on it. That's why I want to vote
I think you could easily amend the motion this evening to direct staff to negotiate with POLC on the proposed position.
So I don't know, of course, Mr. Delrico, if there's consensus for that, but hang tight. Let me exhaust whatever additional questions or concerns there may be, and then the chair would be happy to entertain a motion as printed, or if it's appropriately worded, I will accept a modified motion. If you have no additional questions, Mr. Gearbaugh, any outstanding questions, comments for the police chief or city manager?
No, I've been working on this for, as we said, since 2015 in different information, and I've asked a number of questions. I've prepared for this meeting tonight. I've read the materials. None of this is new, even these issues in terms of the position. I am not a union buster. I supported our contracts. We have negotiated in good faith every time I've been on council. The concern here is we need to make sure this position is identified properly, that follows federal government laws, and if it needs to be union, it will be union. My concern here now is to make sure that this moves forward in terms of how we debate this, and I think we need to go move on to the next motion, so I have no further questions.
Okay, easy enough. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, any comments or questions regarding the city manager and police chief's memo?
Thank you. I just have one question, and I believe it would be for the city manager. That panic look. When we first started talking about this, we had talked about there were aspects that our dispatch provided that we wanted to look at Metro Dispatch providing, and sort of what I will refer to as a la carte services. Do we feel comfortable that we are getting all of those ancillary services, and are those included in the price in which we are agreeing to in this contract?
Yes, exactly. That scope of services that we've drafted, really the operational guide that Police Chief Radzik and I have been working with Metro Dispatch on over the last 6 months, defines all of that information. And anything that was not something that could be handled by dispatch or was really already administrative or clerical in nature being performed by dispatch, we moved into this other position.
Thank you. And what I'm referring to is sort of that chain of command of understanding that if there was an issue, a call that came in, that there was an issue with the wastewater treatment plant, of that they would take the lead on who to contact, all of those pieces to it that our dispatchers are currently handling now, that those have been worked through and they are included in our agreement.
Yes, in that example, we identify one primary point of contact for those specific instances, and that creates our internal processes for responding to whatever the nature of the issue is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Mr. Seo, any additional questions for the city manager, police chief, or staff?
One quick edit, just so we have a clean record going into this. The very first sentence in your background brief says December 19th, 2023.
Oh, you're correct, yes.
Yep, so, okay.
It's the future.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Correction will be made without objection. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, questions for the city manager or police chief?
Yes, I just have two quick ones. I'd like to emphasize that we communicate with the collective bargaining to see if this is appropriate to be a union position or not. And secondly, since the compensation and fringe benefits was brought up, how does it compare with what Metro provides to its employees?
Ostensibly, Metro has richer benefits than the city. They offer a true pension plan. We only have a hybrid pension plan.
Okay, all right. That doesn't affect my decision process, but I like knowing that. Thank you.
One last call for questions. There appear to be none. Then we have a motion on the floor moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Seo, to acknowledge receipt of the memo from the city manager and from Police Chief Radzik. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the second motion, which will be a motion to approve or not to approve the agreement for police dispatch services with Washtenaw County in an amount of $135,975 for a 15-month period, or any modified motion that is appropriately worded.
Given the discussions we've had, I would move to approve.
Okay, simply to approve, no additional language, Mr. Seo, is that correct?
No additional language.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Gearbaugh. Again, we'd like to hear from everybody, so everybody will have ample opportunity to provide a statement or perspective on this matter. I've been starting at that end, so, and you provided a statement, but we'll give you a second bite at the apple. Mr. Kamara-Sulak or Mr. Seo, would you like to begin?
I'll begin. Like I said before, a very difficult situation. And I appreciate all of you here and sharing what your experiences have been. And I don't take that lightly. So, but we have to make a decision. So I will be voting in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak. Mr. Seo?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. In my past life as an Ann Arbor police officer, we had to serve 6 months of our time, once we became a fully sworn officer, in dispatch, operating in all the dispatch positions that existed at that time. There was a call taker, there was a dispatcher, and there was a lean operator in dispatch, so we knew it was the old adage of walk a mile in the people's shoes. So you knew how to appreciate what the job the dispatchers were doing. So that was the beginning of my first contact really with dispatch, other than just being in the car and talking to them over the radio. Fast forward quite a few years, came here to Saline, and I was working as the deputy chief of police, and dispatch fell under my purview. So those people worked more or less directly for me, and I certainly came to appreciate all that they could provide. But as time advances, the technology advanced, the job has changed, and the requirements of the job have changed, and the political atmosphere has changed, and the tenor of the kinds of things that go on in public have changed. such that it demands perhaps a different kind of response than I think one person alone in the room can adequately provide. So given that and our need for providing budgetary savings, I'm convinced that this is the right thing to do, and I will be voting in the affirmative. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. I'm just going to pretty much read a statement. Thank you. The city, staff, and councils throughout the years continually question how we can best serve our residents. The short answer, provide a community that is safe, clean, and meets the needs and expectations of our residents. This is the standard to which I base my decisions. Dispatch is one of those elements that we can have a very personal piece to. When we have an emergency, we want to know that someone will help us. I understand that personal piece. I've lived that personal piece. And I've had the opportunity to listen and learn from your personal narratives. Please know that you have been heard. Decisions like this should not be made in haste. I truly believe that this has been a thoughtful, in-depth process that spans many years. It is at this time that we have the confidence, that I have the confidence, in the city's decision to outsource dispatch services. Please know that so much of what has been written and repeated on social media is false and made to provoke fear and anger. We will always be here to provide the truth. Please come see us for correct information. With the transition of dispatch services to Washtenaw County, the city is committed to a smooth transition, continued excellent service, and above all, the ongoing safety to all of our community members. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Mr. Gearbaugh, Councilmember Gearbaugh.
This has been a difficult decision. As I've been on council for my 20 years and basically over a period of 25 years, I've worked with 4 different police chiefs. I've known at least another one besides before I came on council. This issue has come up periodically every year since I've been on council because discussions were always made at what do we do to improve or to increase our public safety and address those issues. We have improved staffing, we've added more officers, we've addressed issues related to fire protection, and those issues continue to come back to us because those are our priorities. My priority is police protection, enforcement, and making sure those officers are out there in the streets and being able to do their work. I'm not discounting dispatch. Our people have worked hard and have put a dedication into this community that we've seen in every one of our members of our staff that work to make sure that Saline is a great community. My look at this has been through the risk aspect, which we did an assessment and analysis of that, the safety that this community is going to have, what we can do to improve police enforcement and to ensure that we can retain our trained police officers, and to assess and discuss the issue of efficiency and money saving. We cannot achieve all of that by not looking within itself of every organization and function we have in this community. We will be looking at the rec center. We will be looking at our wastewater treatment plant. We will be looking at all the other functions. But we only have one pile of money. And as other individuals have stated, where do we find cuts and where do we try to fix it? This is an alternative. It is not an elimination. Yes, we are changing jobs, but every community is facing this. The pandemic caused an extremely issue for us in terms of costs. We cannot afford infrastructure at the value of what we had 5 years ago. The costs have gone up 50% for construction costs. The expectations of salaries have gone up significantly. Our officers requested and we granted hybrid pension plans, a change to our own pension plans after we had made decisions not to continue doing that. We are working towards achieving safety. My hope is that by doing this and reinvesting the money in which we're moving and saving from this within our own officers, we can continue to not only add, but also possibly change how we structure our officers. We may need somebody that's an expertise in mental health. Those are the concerns that we have responses. We need mental health support for our officers facing the trials and tribulations that they're seeing right now. We can't forget that we also each understand what you all have faced. I have faced friends that have been murdered because of domestic abuse. We also are dealing with townships that are refusing to invest into the type of safety and public safety that we put forward. But their expectation is that we, this city, provide it to them. I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer. We have to either pay for our own or we all have to work together. There's even aspects of legislation now that are moving to minimal staffing requirements that may make it required to move to regional because we will not be able to afford those types of approaches. This is not the end all, but we're going to be advancing and moving forward. I'm supporting this move because I believe our chief, our former chief, the Metro Dispatch have moved forward from, I remember 10 years ago when it was inside of a little building in downtown Ann Arbor next to the former fire station. We now have a top tech organization that has backup, that has the stations and locations to make sure that the dispatchers can be there 24/7 during an emergency or an extreme event that happens in our county. I don't want us to be a city that is continuing to grow that cannot answer phone calls or cannot achieve the things that we want to make sure that people get their responses and receive that. We will work on this and we'll continue to work on this. And as I've said to my colleagues, we will hold our city manager, our chief, and other staff accountable to make sure that this continues to occur. We have been doing that in this last 2 years, and we're going to make sure it continues. I will support this vote.
Thank you, Mr. Gerba. I appreciate those comments. Councilmember Del Orco.
Just that, stand by my original statement. Without support for modified language, I'll stand by my original statement.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Rice, anything you'd like to add?
I would just like to add that I agree with my colleague, Mr. Del Orco here. However, I do have confidence that we will be able to go back to the drawing board and negotiate and try to get this back to the union. I will fight that until the end. But for this matter at hand, I will vote yes. You already heard my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stick on that issue specifically for just a moment. I think we have clarity on that particular matter, but there's some disagreement on the dais pertaining to that particular issue. My position mirrors that of Councilmember Rice. I have been consistent that I have been historically, I am today a supporter of collective bargaining units and the labor movement more broadly. So if that becomes a union position, I certainly would not have any objections, and I'm hopeful that we can move in that direction. I hope you'll indulge me because I have some prepared remarks and then I have some off-the-cuff remarks as well. First, it appears that we have consensus on this issue. And that the subsequent vote moved by CO, seconded by Gearbaugh to approve will be adopted. Perhaps not unanimously, but likely by a 6-to-1 vote. I do want to acknowledge all the people who attended this evening and all those people who have reached out to us via email, phone call, or text message. We have heard your voices and we do genuinely appreciate the perspective. And that's what makes this community great, is that people avail themselves of the democratic process and engage with their elected officials. There have been some really good comments made at the dais here, some by Mr. Gearbaugh, some by Mr. CO about the inevitability of change. Also some great comments by my colleague and friend, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, about making sure that we're dealing in fact, and when people have legitimate questions and concerns, they're always encouraged to reach out to us. Here's a simple fact. Our police officers, our dispatchers today and historically have done a phenomenal job for us. We are very blessed. We have much to be thankful for. Our local dispatch service is something special and it is something unique. But it is indeed correct that times change and municipal services have to evolve. We know that many communities in our vicinity have made a successful transition to consolidated dispatch. Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor, Milan, Pittsfield Township. I talked to the mayor of Chelsea, and I think it'll likely be something that her community considers in the future as well. I have talked to many of the chief electeds in municipalities that have made this change, including my friend and colleague, the supervisor of Pittsfield Township. I reached out to the mayor of Ann Arbor just this past week and had a conversation with the Ann Arbor police chief today and the city manager, and I shared some of that feedback with our city manager and with police chief, and I hope they're able to follow up on that in the coming months. I too will be supporting this motion. I think that we can still provide the citizens, business owners, property owners of Saline a adequate and sufficient level of service and meet their current and future needs, while also improving in some aspects, as were previously articulated by our police chief. Let me add a few things. So I accept the finality of this outcome, which of course will be ratified momentarily in just a few moments by City Council. This topic has been fiercely fought over and of course hotly debated. And I understand that if Saline Dispatch is consolidated into Washtenaw County Metro, there will be disappointment. Many in the community will be disappointed. But that disappointment must be overcome by a unity of purpose. All of us in the Saline community, but especially those in city government, must work to ensure that there is a smooth and successful transition, which I have no doubt can be achieved, and that we continue to meet the needs and effectively serve our residents and business owners. Also, please do not interpret the debate that we had and discussion that we had at the dais and the debate that has existed within the community as signs of our areas or our city's weaknesses. Rather, strength is shown most clearly through the difficulties that we can overcome together. In Saline, it's true, we fight hard when the stakes are high and come together when the contest ends. And so again, I call upon all of my colleagues, community members, to ensure that this is a successful transition. There will be opportunity to discuss and provide feedback in the ensuing weeks and months. Again, the status quo will be maintained likely until early April, but I am confident that we can transition smoothly to Washtenaw County and still provide the community, the residents of Saline, with exceptional 911 emergency services. With that, unless there are questions or comments for me, I think we are prepared to vote. And I thank everybody for an excellent discussion, and again, those of you who attended tonight and provided feedback. We have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Gearbaugh, to approve the agreement for police dispatch services with Washtenaw County in an amount of $135,975 for a 15-month period. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it, and the motion carries 6-1. Thank you very much. We proceed now to agenda item 23-200, early voting agreement with Washtenaw County. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Clerk Royal and to approve or not to approve the agreement between the City of Saline and Washtenaw County for early voting.
I'd move to acknowledge.
Just to acknowledge, Mr. Seal?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is it, Mr. Gearbaugh, are you comfortable seconding that?
Yes.
Okay. Clerk Royal, do you care to provide a brief comment, and then we'll open it up for questions?
Sorry, I had to.
Pull the microphone close.
This is an agreement for the proposal 22-2. November 22, the proposal 2 passed, which gives people the 9 days prior to an election to vote early. And what this is doing is allowing the county to hold locations for our voters. Our voters would go to Pittsfield Township is where our voters would do their early voting. This is the Sunday prior to this Sunday before.
Very good. There are questions for the city clerk. Mr. Seal, do you want to begin as the mover of the motion, and I'll transition to Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. When I read this, I was struck with an immense feeling of, I guess to say in plain English, who's the knucklehead that proposed this kind of legislation in our state? How do they think that this is not, I mean, it seemed to me like an absentee vote certainly accomplished what this is trying to accomplish without all the expense, without all the turmoil, without all the possibility for lost votes, for confusion in the poll books. on and on and on. I mean, I've worked the absentee vote count, as you know, over the years, so I'm somewhat familiar with the way the voting process works, or did work. Now, it seems like they're trying to make it not work.
I understand.
And I guess I'm asking a question of you that's unfair, but it just struck me as totally ludicrous, and I guess that's all I have to say, Your Honor.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just under process and understanding, how will this be communicated to community members? And when you say Pittsfield, any idea where that location is going to be? Their city hall, something?
Pittsfield Township Hall.
Okay.
We don't know how it's going to be communicated yet. This won't happen until the February 27th or March 12th election. Again, that date has not been set in stone.
Okay.
So we're still grasping with a lot of this stuff, and because there are so many questions, it's easier to follow along with the county, who's doing 23 of the communities instead of doing our own. However, if we do at some point decide that we could do this on our own, we do have the ability to pull out of this agreement. But because this is a law that's been put into place, and we do get audited a lot after elections, it's not something I feel comfortable doing at this point on my own. It's just me and a part-time deputy, and I don't know that I could pull this off and not have something go wrong.
Well, and as I look at this, what you mentioned, the number of days and hours and stuff that make this available, this is similar to even when we talk about with dispatch. It's like, it's a cost for us, a huge cost to maintain all of this, taking staff or having to bring in poll workers and everything else. Your coordination is needed to do other things, so.
Correct, and this is not something we can or can't do. This is something required by law now. This has been voted into law, so it's something that we now have to deal with.
And to verify, this is not effective November. As you just said, we don't know yet, so whatever, continue to do what we're doing now.
Correct, this will not go into effect until January or the February presidential or March presidential, whenever that date has been decided. That has not been put in stone yet either.
I just wanted to emphasize that because I think that's going to be a confusion already, so thank you very much.
Definitely. Councilmember Rice, did you have a question?
I had the exact same question.
Okay, easy enough. Additional questions, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
I just wanted to make a quick statement. Many months ago, I attended an MML conference, and this was a huge topic. And there was a room full of electeds that sat there sort of slack-jawed going, what did we do? And for communities like Saline, we theoretically could handle this. It would be a huge burden. It'd be a huge expense. When you start looking at small municipalities, there's no way that they can meet the parameters of this. So having these collective sites is really the only solution that there is. It does seem as though there are a lot of opportunities for things to go awry. And it just seems as though, as we've had claims of election issues in past years, this is just going to catapult that to a sphere that we could never have imagined. So I understand what people wanted to do. I don't think that we totally understood what we were doing when this was voted in. It is a process, and having a secured site that is maintained by people, and it can't be, I mean, there are so many requirements to it that it's going to be very difficult. And like I said, we are very fortunate to be in an area in which we can partner with other municipalities. There are other communities that don't have someone down the street. It's their next door community is exactly like them. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how that process works, and if in the next few months they're able to work through a lot of the kinks that still exist to make it a successful process.
I agree with all that and what was articulated by Councilmembers CO and Gearbaugh. I think this would be a great issue to bring up, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, when you and others go to the upcoming MML convention, if there's a legislative panel to voice our consternation and concern, and hope that MML can advocate on our behalf to members of the state Senate, the House, and the governor's office to make the appropriate modification to the existing statute. If there's no additional questions, we do have a motion on the floor simply to acknowledge receipt that was moved by CO, seconded by Gearbaugh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Gearbaugh to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. I'll let Del Orco be the second on that one. I'll get you next time, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Any discussion? Mr. Seal?
Yes, Your Honor. I only vote in favor of this to spare our poor clerk the misery of trying to implement this law on her own.
Thank you.
And I would compel my colleagues and everybody out there in the audience to talk to your congressperson about how in the hell did this happen? Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, it's actually state, Mr. Seal, so we want to make sure that they.
Well, that's what I'm,
no.
state legislator.
Congress is doing its own thing. But
Yeah. Mr. Kamir Sulak?
Mr. Seal took the words right out of my mouth. Just looking at this and the amount of time and, resources and all that you do already, I feel forced that we have to do this. And it's with that really makes me going to vote in the affirmative.
Very good. Councilmember Rice, before we vote?
My high school biology teacher, proper planning prevents poor performance. I do not feel like this is properly planned. I do not feel confident that this is going to prevent poor performance. However, in a community of our size and capabilities, we're stuck here. So I think we're going to have to vote yes on this. But I am one of the three attending the MML conference, and I will find every opportunity to discuss this should it be available. And I will also write our local representatives and tell them that this is a hot mess.
Excellent. Appreciate that. If there's nothing further, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Del Orco to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 23-201. This is Hero Walk Community Event. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Clerk Royal and to approve or not to approve the Hero Walk Community Event with no waiver of fees and using public portion of the sidewalk south side of Curtis Park Bluffs.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, boy, I was getting tongue-tied there, to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. Clerk Royal, do you care to make a brief comment?
This is just a community event that's happening at Curtis Park, and they're going to be walking around using the sidewalks. I thought it was best because they did ask for the police to get involved, and Police Chief Radzik is using VIPs to help these people make sure that there's no problems as they go through their walk.
Very good. Questions for the city clerk? Mr. Seal.
Just that I would encourage the VIPS folks to pay particular, if they're going to stay on the sidewalk on the south side of the street, that's the only side that there is a sidewalk of the street. They'll have to cross the intersection there at Curtis Park, or Curtis Lane and Monroe Street. They'll have to cross Curtis Lane. So maybe they want to have a VIPS person there. Is it going to be the folks with disabilities that are walking?
There's going to be a few, but this is their first time, so there could be as many as 75 or less. The lady stated that it depends a lot on the weather, because if the weather's bad, and in October, there's a chance that it could snow. It's Michigan.
But I guess particular attention to the places where they'll have to cross the roadways. I think they'll have to cross the roadway in Curtis Park itself to get onto the sidewalk going into Curtis Park Bluffs, and then once again on Curtis Lane at Monroe Street. So those would be the two places I think would be most dangerous for them.
And then the third place is they'll have to cross over where the driveway to the park to get to the sidewalk that goes to. So yeah, those are the three locations that we had pointed.
Okay, very good.
Additional questions? Mr. Gearba?
Just quick, Terry, is this open to the public, or what's their intent and all that?
Yes, this is open to the public. It is a fundraiser, so they are looking for donations to do the walk.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Commander Sulek, did you have a question?
Yeah, just to confirm, this is October 7th,
Yes.
based on the emails? Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Discussion or debate on the motion? No, we have a motion then moved by Dillon, seconded by Commander Sulek to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We come now to discussion, reports and announcements. Again, I'll start to my left and then to my right. Councilmember Rice, any reports or announcements?
We're voting on Green Thumb Awards tomorrow, so that's very exciting from the Parks Commission. Nothing else to report at this time.
Okay.
Good night.
Councilmember Del Orco?
Just that the Environmental Commission and the Parks Commission have agreed to have a joint meeting tomorrow, so I don't have anything to report yet, because the Code Review Task Force has been, or committee has canceled, so nothing till next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gearba?
I want to make a promo, but probably, this will happen before that. October 1st, from 12 to 4 will be harvest time out at Rentschler Farm. We hope again to do our successful event, and we'll have pumpkins for kids to decorate. We'll have the Saline fiddlers and some different crafters and things demonstrating, and then also the little hayride where we take people around the shopping center and that. And that'll be again October 1st, Sunday, October 1st, from 12 to 4. Also, I'd like to invite everybody in the public to come see the new paint jobs at the farm and at the depot. As you know, the depot is quite a big change, and we were happy to be able to bring about a historical paint scheme of the building that was probably around 1890, we believe. Originally, it was dark gray and black when it was first built, but we wanted to have something a little more, I think, uplifting, and so that's all done. And we would look forward to seeing everyone for those events. Thank you.
Very good. Two things, and one I'll start with as a question to the city manager. Our infrastructure coffee hour town hall last week, that was recorded, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can we make sure that we share that online and on social media? I indicated this in a conversation I had recently with Councilmember Gearba. I thought that was one of our better events. I thought the presentation and PowerPoint from your office, the city engineer and our DPW director was excellent, and it was a good eclectic mix of some new and old faces and really good questions and discussions. So if people have inquiries regarding what was done this year and what to expect in future years on the infrastructure front, water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, the dam, I would strongly encourage you to take a look. And then the last item, and I copied all of my council colleagues in on multiple responses, but if you recall, the Daughters of the American Revolution are doing an event at Oakwood Cemetery this Sunday.
September 24th.
Yeah, and so is the Historic Society, are you a co-sponsor of that?
Not necessarily, but we're going to attend it and promote it as
Okay.
part of our thing.
Okay, very good. City Manager O'Toole, because the city is involved in the Historic Society, I'm hoping we can put something on social media, on our social media pages about that as well. Okay, very good. And the public is welcome to attend that as well. Do you have the 24th at, is it 2 o'clock?
2 p.m.
2 p.m., okay. Yeah. The rear of the cemetery, the older section of the cemetery. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, reports or other announcements?
Thank you. Just a few things. The Cable Commission met for its monthly meeting, and we had an opportunity to discuss the technical difficulties that happened at our last council meeting and sort of debrief on that. And to be honest, what happened is it was network issues. It was not a failure of equipment. It was not a failure of staff. It was just a network connection issue, and technology happens. So we are working through that. Sometimes there's glitches. We do appreciate that Tran Longmore was available to record our meeting, and so that meeting has been posted. If you do notice anything with recordings of council meetings or public events, please bring them to my attention or to the attention of Ben Goodman through Saline Area Schools, and we can make sure that the technology is fully functional. A couple of other things. The mayor had asked me to provide a long overdue update as to the Saline Drug Task Force. That group has been on a bit of a hiatus for quite a while. Where it is right now is it is being transformed into more of a community outreach type of a group. It is still within legal for review. There's some technical issues. But as we kind of get it a little bit more into focus, I will start to talk about it as I solicit community members to join our new board and to get involved in what we will hopefully have are some new activities aligned with it. So we are very much looking forward to that. The other question that sort of comes up every once in a while is fireworks. And is Saline doing fireworks? Also, again, that committee is sort of on a hiatus because there are a lot of moving factors with fireworks. Obviously, first and foremost is cost. And without a sponsor, it is not a cost in which the city would be able to incur. The other big issue is location. Location, location, location. In the past, we have always done fireworks on Saline Area Schools property in the area behind Liberty School and behind the middle school. That area is due to be transformed into some new fields and a whole new athletic campus. And it is my understanding that once that is developed, they are going to be very conservative in approval of fireworks there. So we are looking at other opportunities. We are always looking for event sponsors. So if you have a personal sponsorship, if you know of a corporation that would like to be involved, please reach out to me. One of the other things that has taken off are, instead of traditional fireworks, are drone presentations. And so that is going to be something that we will explore. It's got a little bit of a better environmental impact, but it does come at a cost. So it is something on the horizon. Again, if it's something that you feel as though you want to be involved in, have some expertise in, or want to contribute dollars towards, please reach out.
Very good. Thank you for those. And one thing, we don't need to get into this evening, but I did communicate via email with Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and if there isn't the desire or resolve to fundraise and organize fireworks in future years, I think we use our limited resources and bandwidth to enhance and potentially grow the very successful Jazz in the Park that occurred this past summer in late July. So we can delve into that one at a subsequent meeting, but I do appreciate the updates. Mr. CEO, any reports or other announcements?
Just want to thank everybody that was involved this last weekend with the Oktoberfest. It was a very successful event, I believe. A number of the faces I see here in the room and the dais were there not only helping, but pitching right in and slinging bratwurst and sauerkraut and beer and yes, selling tickets. And
of course, we acknowledge you, our colleague, who not only was knighted this year in Germany, but also received the honor and designation of being the Festmeister for the 2023 Oktoberfest, which is quite an honor.
Your Honor, it was not my intent to bring all those things up.
No, but I did.
Thank you. Anyway, I just want to thank everybody in the community. It takes a community to make an event like that successful, and this community always pitches right in and makes a go of it. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Kamara Sulak, any other reports or announcements?
Yes, the DEI committee, we completed the updates on the bylaws and formally adopted them. That was a big accomplishment. And then discussing goals and assignments for the upcoming months, and including collaborating with other committees and commissions in the city towards common goals. The Saline Youth Council meets tomorrow for the first time this school year, and then the Arts and Culture on Wednesday. So it's going to be a fun week.
Very good. And yes, I chatted, I think, with the city manager. We look forward to council being able to review and sign off on those bylaws at likely our next meeting in October. Appreciate your work on that. If there are no additional discussion items, we come to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any person may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Please, once you begin, you will have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I know that you have all voted, but I would like to comment on the dispatch situation. First of all, has anybody considered asking your voters to increase the amount that they pay towards public safety? Dispatchers are part of the public safety. Why do you see them separate? They are one unit. They tell your officers where to go. Secondly, I have seen paychecks. Your dispatchers are not making $25 an hour. I would like to have that clarified because that was mentioned, and that is not true. That is a fallacy. And I live just outside of the city limits, unfortunately. I have to call, when I call 911, I'm calling the county and I have to wait for MSP to come. I can't even have our local people. They are 5 minutes away. I have to wait an hour for an officer. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. We appreciate that comment. Thank you for your patience this evening. Appreciate you hanging with us. There are additional citizen comments this evening. Clerk Royal, please.
I have two questions. One, I think I heard today at this meeting that finances have never looked so good, or have never the city's financial situation has never looked so good as it does today, now that Colleen and Elle are on the job. But at the same time, you're saying that as you have to have budget cuts and cut jobs? Did I hear that right? Okay, and my question I hope to get an answer on is Jim DeLorco, Councilor DeLorco, asked City Manager O'Toole, what happens 15 months from now if this contract is not good? And I didn't hear an answer to that, which seems like a really important question and answer to have before a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional citizen comments? Yeah, let me real quick. Clerk Royal, did we receive any written comments in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their remarks read at this time?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Yes, I believe.
Can I address those?
Absolutely. I think they.
Both me.
Yep.
So to answer the question of whether or not Ms. O'Toole answered, what do we do in 15 months? She did answer that, and we discussed it, that we can look at this contract in 15 months.
Yeah, that's not, you can look at the contract, but if it doesn't work.
Let me finish my sentence, please.
And we'll let Colleen respond as well, Tran. We can, we'd love to continue the conversation subsequent to tonight's meeting.
And I asked, what would it look like to bring dispatch back? And that's an operational question. That wasn't fully answered this evening, but I didn't really expect that to be fully answered this evening. Do you want me to continue to answer your questions, or do you want to have discourse?
Or you can just ask more questions so they can tap dance for you.
I think I'm done here. Thank you.
Okay. City Manager O'Toole, do you have any comment this evening?
Sure. So the response to that question was that we built in a 120-day transition period. If the city is dissatisfied with the service, we'd have 120 days to switch back either to our existing service, a separate service, or identify what deficiencies exist with the contract and come up with a separate plan.
Very good. And let me respond very briefly to Mrs. West. Again, we appreciate those remarks. Make no doubt about it, dispatchers are part of our public safety portfolio. And call takers are a vital component to public safety, as are corrections officers, police officers, et cetera. So we very much value and appreciate our current dispatchers and feel the same way about our previous dispatchers. As I indicated earlier, we've been served in this community by some really exceptional public servants for many years. We can certainly get you data on salaries and benefits for not just dispatchers, but any employee of our PD. We can certainly provide that or share that at subsequent meetings. And as it relates to the specific question of a public safety millage, I don't know that we've ever formally engaged our electorate or our citizens on that particular issue, but I do think it is a good point and something worth considering and discussing at perhaps a future town hall or coffee hour event. I got to leave it with that, but I can chat with you after the meeting if you'd like. Please note our upcoming meetings. October and November are going to be pretty busy, and then we have a laundry list of board, commission, and committee meetings, which any and all are welcome to attend. And at this time, unless there's anything further to be brought before City Council, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:33 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Camara Sulek. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.